as well as agendas, minutes, and recordings, can be found on Broomfield's website at broomfield.org/council meetings. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. I'm going to take a step back. Are we broadcasting yet, Curtis? Because the screen still says coming up. Okay, we just haven't changed the screen. Okay, I'll continue then. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1 minute to speak. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available in the back of the council chambers through our AV team. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. No council members are absent. Councilmember Delgadillo is attending remotely. A quorum of the council is present, so would everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, we're going to ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. And we'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move item 6D from consent to the business agenda.
Thank you. Item 6D will be reviewed first as the first item under action items. Are there any objections to this agenda being approved as modified? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. There are no items under petitions and communication, so we'll move on to council member reports. Does any member of council have any reports or updates this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So just this last week, we had the CCAT legislative breakfast. Colorado and counties and commissioners acting together as CCAT. We had our legislative breakfast down at the Capitol. Both Broomfield's legislators, Senator Faith Winter, as well as Representative William Lidstead, attended the breakfast, and I had the opportunity to meet with them briefly about some of the bills that council is looking at, mainly YIGBY. And we also discussed the budget and the potential implications to Broomfield around that budget. So good conversations, and happy to report that both of them were able to attend this year. So good conversations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to apprise council that DRCOG did its yearly elections. And in addition to doing elections, they do appointments for all of their boards and commissions that they have internally and represent externally. I will be serving as an alternate again for the Regional Transportation Commission, or the RTC. And I will also be serving as the alternate on the State Transportation Advisory Committee for DRCOG.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Marsh-Holshen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let council and the community know that this next week I'll be attending the National Association of Counties Conference, legislative conference in DC. I am vice chair on the Finance and Pensions Committee. This year they're doing a panel on the importance of bonds to our local communities and the tax exempt status of those bonds. And they have invited me to be one of the panelists on that presentation. So I'll be happy to represent Broomfield and our community on that.
Thank you very much. Any other reports from council? All right. Moving on. Next is public comment. We'll now continue, and this is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed elsewhere on this evening's agenda. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Watching that clock. Hello, good to see you again. I'm Jessica Jones. I'm the director of the Broomfield Early Childhood Council, a Broomfield community-based nonprofit dedicated to supporting the quality, capacity, accessibility, and equity of early childhood health and education across public and private sectors, partners, and families in Broomfield County. Lately, every sector of public funding is being shaken up. There's a lot of scrutiny, tenuous programming, and restructuring. As our Early Childhood Council has federal funding that's flowed through the state, through the Child Care Development Fund, we are not out of the woods just yet, but for us, it's business as usual. We will continue to do the work in our mission and support our early childhood educators and Broomfield families. Part of our work is helping to strengthen awareness of the value and professionalism of early childhood educators. I was emailing earlier with our city manager, Jen Hoffman, and she reminded me that early childhood is the foundation of learning and growing. It helps set our children up for positive reading scores in 3rd grade and for positive math scores in 8th grade. 90% of a child's brain, a human's brain, is developed by age 6. It's easier to build strong humans than fix broken ones. And the people who help us build the strong humans are professionals in early childhood education. And through this new campaign we're doing, we call it the Brain Builders. So this campaign is to bring awareness to our community that the 441 licensed early childhood educator professionals in Broomfield County are more than babysitters or daycare. They are professionals in teaching our most precious resource, which are children, how to trust, make friends, manage big feelings, how to share, take direction, and resolve conflict. Traits that are essential for any human and seem to be lacking sometimes in our adult world. Our educators allow also our economy to thrive, where adults can go to work and have their children be safe, loved, and educated. We'll be sharing these posters and little postcards all over the county to celebrate our brain builders, and also these squishy brains, and I brought enough for everybody today, so everybody can have a squishy brain. It'll be all over the county to celebrate our brain builders. And another way we're celebrating is through our Early Childhood Conference in April, where we'll be delivering skill buildings and resources that they can take into their classroom or facility the very next day to over our 2,000 children who are in childcare in Broomfield. Anybody is invited to attend this conference. We're doing a brunch from 10 to 11:30. I did invite the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, but anybody is welcome to come and meet those constituents. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next month when we celebrate child abuse prevention awareness work with our pinwheels. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Hi, I'm Janet Sund, Ward 5. Good evening, council, mayor, and staff. What I wanted to talk about tonight is not something that's on your agenda or anything. What I wanted to speak about is the way I see the council, the way I see the city is the city council, the mayor, the staff, we're all part of Broomfield. We're all residents of Broomfield. This council, what the citizens are speaking on, whether we agree with them or not, they're the voices of the citizens. They're the taxpayers. They're the people that live here that have to deal with what the city council decides. And what I want to say is there have been several times over the last couple months that there have been outbursts from some of the council members, particularly Todd Cohen, regarding when an issue is brought up, it is deemed, he talks about the current political climate or the new, he's basically talking about the Trump administration. I don't really care what people's political affiliation is. I think that you sit there and smirk, and that's not okay, Mr. Cohen. That's part of your problem. You need to be here for the citizens. You're the,
Fine. You should address me.
okay. the comments about the current administration or getting upset about something that any of the citizens are speaking about and blaming it on the current climate for the president is not appropriate. That has no business in this chamber. We're about Broomfield. Citizens bring up stuff because they're concerned about Broomfield, and that's where it should be left off. And there shouldn't be any snarky comments from any of the council members regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Come on up, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is David Schambler. I'm a resident of Willow Park, and I'm here with my concern about why I'm going to be charged for a opt-out garbage fee when I have no trash service today, and I haven't had for 8 years. I recycle everything as a household of one. I use nickel. I compost what I need to compost. I take valuable metals down to Canland and get money for them, and the electronics get recycled at Best Buy. So I've had no trash service for the last maybe 8 or 9 years, and I don't plan on having any. Now, am I going to be charged for an opt-out for something I don't have today, or how is this going to work? I don't feel like I should be. $10.50 a month because I am not going to have something that I don't have today?
What was your name again?
David Schomler, Schomler.
Well, this is, public comment isn't really a question and answer, but we will get back to you offline and explain the options.
Okay, this is my first time up here, so,
Thank you for coming.
and you have my,
We
I
can-
guess you could say, let's just say concern, okay?
Thank you for letting us know.
Hi there, I'm Mercy Manresa. I'm also with the Broomfield Early Childhood Council. I'm the Family Engagement Program Coordinator, also a resident of Broomfield in the Brandywine neighborhood. We just wanted to give you a quick update on some of the things that we have coming up. Our Incredible Years class, which is a 14-week parenting class, is currently happening for both our Spanish and English-speaking communities, being held at Emerald Elementary School. On April 2nd, we do have our Pinwheels Prevention Kickoff event happening at the Broomfield Auditorium from 10 to 10:30 in the morning, and all public is welcome to come and attend that. That same day, in collaboration with the Broomfield Library, we will be presenting another 7-week parenting course called Confident Parenting at the Broomfield Detention Center. On April 5th, you can find us at Tiny Tot Town at Broomfield High School with many other partners that are here in Broomfield supporting families of young children. On April 9th, we'll have free developmental screenings for children 0 to 3 being held at Six Garden Center from 4:15 to 6:30 to take place during the timing that their later evening hours are happening for families there at Fish. And also on April 12th, Jessica mentioned, we'll be having our Early Childhood Education Conference, and that will be held at the Broomfield Community Center. For information on any of these that we've mentioned, you can visit our website at broomfieldecc.org. And then also on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Broomfield Early Childhood Council and the staff, we want to acknowledge that Jessica Jones has her work anniversary coming up next month, and we won't be back until after. But she has been involved since before it was its own independent nonprofit, since I believe 2011, and then for almost the last 10 years since we've been an independent nonprofit. And we are so grateful. She sometimes isn't eligible to be recognized for things because she doesn't currently live in Broomfield, but she cares so much about this community. And we are so grateful for all of the support from the city and county of Broomfield, including all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Jessica.
Short people. Hi, I'm Sandy Anderson. A little bit of voice going today from the Broadlands Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city leadership staff. I'd like to thank you for all you do, as it is well beyond what is understood, acknowledged, and you all deserve our respect and support. I'm also grateful for your governance without hate, without chaos, without infiltration to our confidential data from non-elected people, nor that you find chainsaws an appropriate image during this slash and burn environment. Let me remind you and our Broomfield neighbors that you were voted in. You won your elections and are who we choose to represent us. You have our trust, you have our support, and you have our vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? All right, then. I don't see anyone online. Next, under reports, staff is going to provide the council with a semi-annual performance and internal audit update. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, community and council. Bernie Block, our internal auditor and director of performance, which is a interesting dual hat to wear. He definitely does the right brain, left brain. But tonight we're here to talk about this semi-annual audit. Mr. Block.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. Bernie Block here to provide a semi-annual performance and internal audit update, which recaps the activities I've been working on since we last met in August of 2024. In December of 2024, I conducted a risk assessment of the organization by looking at changes in our environment. I interviewed senior personnel and also did research on audit issues facing local governments. Using this information, I updated the potential future projects listing and discussed that with the city and county manager's office and the city county attorney. Based on their feedback and the research conducted, the performance and internal audit project plan was put together, and that's attachment number 1 in your packet for the 2025 year. Also included in your packet is attachment 2, which is performance and internal audit status updates listing, which provides a summary of the audit findings, recommendations, and the status of issued audits with open and recently implemented items. Performance audits conducted since we last met include the revenue payment processing audit, which was issued in September 24. Fleet maintenance was issued in December of 24. The overtime audit is currently in progress, and the planning phases for the cybersecurity audits currently in progress as well. There have been no special reviews. I've started the planning for the 20-day environmental review letter business process improvement project. I also provide consultation to staff on a variety of topics, which include internal controls, external audit related issues, enterprise resource planning system, grants administration, and I've started doing some research on artificial intelligence as well. Professional development, I continue to contribute to the innovation ecosystem efforts, which focuses on process improvement and change management tools. Delivered a training in August and September of 2024. And then other activities include following up on previously issued audits, maintenance of the employee fraud hotline, and strategic planning efforts. So that's a high-level overview of what I've been working on, and I welcome any questions that you may have about those activities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Block. We'll now proceed with public comment, starting with in person. If anyone would like to comment on this item, now's the time. Being none online, we'll move on to council member questions and comments. Councilmember Lim.
Thank you for your report. I saw in the report that there's in the works your collaboration with the public works staff on setting up the stormwater division. So given the interest that we have in the water rates, I thought it would be helpful if you discussed what direction that's going in.
Yes, I believe my role is going to be to come in after staff has kind of put a project plan together to evaluate that, to provide any feedback of any gaps there may be. It's not actually putting it together, but just a second set of eyes for what might be involved with that.
Okay. The other item that I was interested in hearing more about was you are already in the process, I think it is, according to your chart, of looking at employee overtime and its relationship to evaluating employee staffing. So I think that was marked in progress already. Did you have anything to state about that?
It is in progress. There are preliminary results. I can say at a very high level that our staff vacancies are probably the primary driver of our overtime. And I'll be delivering a more detailed report on that. But approved positions that were approved for the 2024 or even 2025, we're just having some challenges filling them in certain areas. Police department, public works, and that's requiring extra work on the part of existing staff. Those are the primary factors.
Will that be that information from that report, will that be just disseminated internally in the staff, or will council see that at all?
Council will receive an audit report like you usually do for
Okay,
every audit. Yes,
great, thank you.
absolutely.
That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Block, for the memo and the presentation. I just have, we'll start off with this question. Can you explain how you or the process that you have ranks the priority levels of these different action items?
That are found in the audit report?
Yeah, that are in this report in attachment 1 and 2.
Yes, I didn't bring my risk matrix with me, but it's basically looks at the probability of an event occurring and then what is the risk involved with that as well. So if it's highly probable and there's a higher risk, obviously that would be a higher ranked item. Also, if there are issues that don't currently have a policy that require one, that would be a higher risk issue. If it's more process improvement and efficiency related matters, those are generally lower risk and would be a lower priority. So that's generally speaking, but I'd be happy to follow up with a more detailed document if that would be helpful.
Okay, great. I guess the only reason I asked that is of the 20 roughly pages that were provided in the memo. There were many that listed references to public works specifically within, I think, the wet side, or what we would probably call the wet side for water, wastewater, stormwater, et cetera. And I guess when you read the description of what the issue that needs to be dealt with is, for a layman's perspective or for someone who has no experience in audit analysis or public works, et cetera, might read something. I have it on my other laptop because I didn't bring this one to work this morning when I read through the whole agenda. Might see that as more important than some of the other things that are put in for the 2025 plan. So I just wanted to kind of go over what that analysis was and why we picked what we picked. So thank you.
You're welcome. I will also admit that some of it is subjective and in the context of the subject matter you're looking at that time as well. But generally speaking, I try to adhere to those qualifiers that I mentioned.
All right, is that all, council member? Any other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you very much for the updates, Mr. Block. Next, under reports, staff is going to provide council with an update regarding the July 4th Great American Picnic. Mr. Shuck, come on down.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Clay Shuck, Director of Operations. Wanted to come tonight and give you a little bit of update on the July 4th celebration, what we call a Great American Picnic. Over the past several months, staff has been looking at this event and looking at ways to potentially restructure it. About a month ago, we met with the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and some of the city manager team to talk about one of those options. And that option at the time was potentially moving the event over into this complex. Unfortunately, after that meeting, we brought out our fireworks vendor and they looked around, and logistically, we just could not find a great site to fire off the fireworks. And so since that's an important part of the 4th of July celebration, we went back to really thinking about the site that we have currently at the Commons, where we have the show, where we have the overall event, and potentially looking at how to restructure and redevelop the footprint within that area. As some of you know, we have issues sometimes on the east side of the pavilion there on the championship field. We've tried to activate it with some kid amenities over the past several years. We're still having some of those issues. What has kind of evolved here in this draft plan, and this is a draft plan, so we're still working on it, is looking at everywhere from the pavilion complex, where in the past you all have had a tent and have handed out items, all the way to the east is fencing in that area. There's a couple things that does for us when we fence it. It provides us the opportunity to have more managed egress areas and entry areas. So we could have folks there looking at bags, checking bags, and those type of things. So in developing that footprint, one of the things that we want to accomplish on that east side is make it a more family-friendly area, which no alcohol would be allowed except in the beer tent. And if you've been in there, our beer tents are very compartmentalized within the overall footprint. They have to have their own fencing. The alcohol cannot leave that area. So all the beer on that east side would have to be, if anybody wanted an alcohol beverage, would have to be within that beer tent area. There would be no other alcohol allowed in the area on that side. We would also maintain the security and structure around the pavilion all the way through the playground down to you see where there's an entry point, kind of the south part there of the Nerf turf game. We would maintain that and have a walkway open that people could walk back and forth, but they would have to enter the fenced areas to go into either one of those pavilions or onto the east side. We're also encouraged overall with our know before you go information is that we're going to really try to push that this is a no alcohol event in total. It's definitely hard to manage overall, but we're going to enforce it on the east side and not do heavy enforcement anywhere else. So, but we are going to encourage folks not to bring alcohol to the event. Thank you. The other thing that I hope that it does is it provides us really that opportunity to have better engagement with folks coming in and families that want to have an event and not get that interference that we've seen in the past few years with the group of kids that comes and takes over the championship field. So that is really kind of the goal here, is to try to break that behavior. The west side would still be open with the different challenges with the fencing. It will help to reallocate some of our resources to help monitor the west side a little bit more as well, because we don't anticipate then having as many problems within the fenced area. We'll still have response in that area, but hopefully with the amount of control, the lack of alcohol, we'll have less issues than we've had in the past, which will allow us to really focus on other areas within the venue. With that, that's kind of the overview that I have. It does change around entry and exit for the buses, so we're working through that right now. North Metro Fire, our police department, emergency management, the recreation staff have all been involved in these conversations. And I feel like right now this is the best opportunity to restructure this footprint for July 4th. The other thing, I guess I will say one other thing on the east side. What we'll do is we'll probably try to enforce a clear bag policy so that we can actually check bags visually as people are walking up. But we will do bag checks for people that want to come into this area. So we're looking at what that looks like currently. And just really, we'd like the event to be more family friendly moving forward. And so that's kind of what we're trying to obtain by adding this type of fencing and security within the venue. So with that, I'm open to take any questions that you might have or answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to public comments now. So Mr. Schrammler, if you want to come up.
Dave Schrammler again. From a security standpoint, who's doing the bag checks? Is that going to be the police department or just citizens?
It's a very good question. Thank you for that question. Currently, no, it will not be citizens. So we will have staff located at all those entry sites. And we're currently working with PD on looking at hiring some additional security personnel to be there with our staff to do those bag checks. So we do not want, we don't want that to be a PD focused event. They've got enough going on that evening. So that's why we're looking at additional security to help with those bag checks.
And Mayor, we know that this is going to be an adjustment for our community. So the communication is going to be early and often. We have tried 4 different variables over the last 4 years. After last year, there was conversation about only having the event during the day and no fireworks. Post-COVID, we've become a hub for kids that have brought with them, and about 80% aren't Broomfield kids, but social media as it is. The meetup place has become Broomfield Commons on the 4th of July. So they spend a day drinking, so by the time they are, they're revved up by the time the sun goes down. So it's like anything, you get a couple of bad behavior, but it's gone from bad behavior to unsafe for our residents and unsafe for our police department. And that those 2 things combined make us take a very different approach. Logistically, last year, we tried to reposition things and not have a single point of entry or a single point of failure, and it didn't work. So short of having a day event only, we're going to try this again this year. We'll be back with council during the debrief. And if it continues to be something that is unmanageable, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman, and thank you, Mr. Shuck. Any questions from council? Councilmember Cohen?
Just a quick question. I believe North Glen does an alcohol-free 4th of July. It's my understanding. Has that been something considered? I don't know what the revenue or attendance ramifications would be, but is that an option?
That's without even the beer tents in there. Is that the question,
I
Councilman Cohen?
believe North Glen has technically a dry event.
Okay. I think any of those are options. Having some of the beer gardens there does help some of our nonprofits to come in and run those. And typically, we don't get many negative incidents out of either one of the beer gardens. The incidents that we typically get are from those individuals that are entering the venue, as Manager Hoffman said, that have been drinking during the day. They come in and then they create issues during the event.
Have you talked to do any other communities have similar issues that you've talked to? Have they implemented any kind of resident-only badging or something to try and control the event?
We have talked to our staff attends a regional special events group, and it was brought up in the last couple meetings, and nobody else is reporting similar incidents as we're dealing with during our event.
Is it possible if they're not residents to remove them, or if they're inebriated at your end, just simple inebriation is grounds for removal?
So during the event, what happens if we do have somebody that does come across that, we do process them to our police officers. PD decides what to do with them. Sometimes we've had to have North Metro transport folks, but there is a method and process into dealing with somebody once they're inebriated within the event. Badging or just simply checking resident IDs. Quite honestly, we have about 130 staff that work this event anyway. To do that, we'd probably have to go way up around 200 staff to be able to check IDs, verify residency, and do those type of things. So I don't foresee that being a viable option moving forward without extensive staff.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, thank you. I actually was going to ask about the why the East Beer Garden, so I understand the nonprofit part of that. So, I mean, it does make sense why you would have it on that side. So thanks for clarifying that. And I just had a couple thoughts. The first one was with this change, and this is down in that communication plan, parents that bring in strollers, I've been there in those parenting years, and you come with your stroller and it's loaded with stuff. If there can be signage as we come into the parking lot, so that people see it to say that I shouldn't like load my stroller up with all these things because it needs to be, if it's a clear bag policy or if it's a limit your stuff that you're bringing in, just indicate that at the parking lot level so that when people get to that entrance, they're not shocked.
Sure.
I would say that that would be my thought as a, having done this multiple times. But I think this is really good that to put this fencing around the area. And then the only other thought is having to consider after the fireworks are over, removing some of the fencing. Is that already in the plan?
That is already
Okay.
planned. Yeah, we will have additional areas of egress after the fireworks are over to quickly disperse the crowd off that east side.
Okay, good. Cause I was like, that'd be really bad to funnel out that way. So, okay, this looks really good though. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? I just want to say, I think this is a move in the right direction. I appreciate you guys putting so much thought in it. I know that it's actually become a deterrent for families to go because of the, the bad actors that show up to cause trouble. So I appreciate you keeping that in mind and creating a true family safe event, because that's what it's meant to be. So thank you very much, Mr. Shuck and your entire team. Councilmember Marshall.
Sorry, I just had a late question pop in my head. Have we considered anything along lines of requiring minors to be accompanied by an adult to kind of avoid the issue with the kids coming in?
Again, I think that's more an enforcement issue. We could put that out there, but enforcing that would be extremely difficult.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Part of our outreach and engagement is going to be with the school districts. Because again, this is a very small juvenile population. We don't have arrests, or holding or, and I'm looking at one of our champions in the back that has been to, I don't know, the last 20 4th of Julys, right along with me. These are juveniles that take advantage of having some freedom and opportunity between a very short window. So again, we need to target in on that and try to keep the residents as least impacted as possible and safe as possible without adding any more to it. So again, part of the messaging and communication this year will be to the schools that says, don't come here. This isn't a welcoming environment for you, just like we always, nothing good happens after 9 o'clock on Broomfield Commons if you're under the age of 18. So enforcement will be high and hot and frequent. And we'll do our very best we haven't reached out to the schools before to have this type of, this is not a welcoming environment for you on the 4th of July.
Good preemptive.
So we'll see what happens.
Thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Shuck. We'll now continue with the report section of the agenda. City Manager Hoffman, do you have any reports tonight?
I do not.
Thank you. And City and County Attorney Rogers?
No, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Council's consideration of the consent items is next. Earlier this evening, Councilmember Ward requested that item 6D be moved to action items. Therefore, it won't be reviewed at this time. Item 6G is a Board of Equalization item. As a reminder, council is the Board of Equalization, so a vote by council on these items is a vote of the BOE. The clerk will read all of the consent items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comments and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6C and 6E through 6H by title?
6A, approval of minutes for the regular council meeting of February 11th, 2025. 6B, proposed resolution number 2025-39, approving the construction agreement with Denver Dirt Works, Inc. for the 2025 ADA Curb Ramp Program project. 6C, proposed resolution number 2025-25, accepting $2 million in state grant funding for the Harvest Hill development and allocating the $2 million to Harvest Hill Owner LLC. Proposed resolution number 2025-27, approving a loan agreement with Harvest Hill Owner LLC for the Harvest Hill project for state grant funds. 6E, proposed resolution number 2025-50, approving the First Amendment to a construction agreement with A.D. Miller Services, Inc. for the Norm Smith Service Center remodel project. Proposed resolution number 2025-18, approving the Second Amendment to the consulting agreement with Short Elliott Hendrickson, Inc. for the Norm Smith Service Center remodel. 6F, proposed resolution number 2025-43, approving a trash, rubbish, and garbage hauling license for Northwest Cascade, Inc. and Aspen Waste Services, Aspen Waste Systems of Colorado, Inc. 6G, proposed resolution number 2025-38, BOE, denying certain abatement petitions. 6H, proposed resolution number 2025-51, approving a third amendment to the agreement for severe weather activation program services with Almost Home, Inc.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed with public comments on these items, starting with in person. If you'd like to be heard, please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, Roxy Jula Lackamore. This has to do with 6C, with the Harvest Hill Affordable Housing Area. This has been going on for 2 years now. We're going into the third year. Seems like Broomfield has trouble getting things built or getting things done when it comes to affordable housing. The ground hasn't been broke. They haven't really done much over there that I've seen, but I haven't been over there during the freezing weather we've had. I'm assuming they wouldn't be working over there during that time anyway. This money is good money, and I expect to see something start happening at this property. If not, then Broomfield is going to its old ways and isn't doing anything again to help affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to be heard? All right, moving on to questions from council. Any questions from City Council? Councilmember Lim.
I had a question on 6B, the ADA curb ramp program project. I just wondered if staff could comment how those are prioritized, and comment on what was unexpected in that mapping of where those projects are going to occur. Was that in the Anthem Ranch neighborhood that there were ADA ramp improvements? I thought that given the later development of that area, that the development would have been required to put in ADA ramps. The only reason I ask that is because I know we have limited funds and many projects to cover.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council, City Leadership. My name is Brian Graham, Capital Improvement Program Manager in ComDev. So our staff has developed basically a set of criteria to evaluate each potential location for ADA ramps, including whether it was a resident request, a crash score, equity score, pedestrian demand in terms of trip generators, as well as a bicycle and pedestrian priority score, and whether or not the potential ramp is on a safe routes to school route or near a school. Specific to Anthem, I do not know, but I can follow up as to why there are ramps that need to be upgraded in that area.
Okay, thank you. Then if someone could address Ms. Jewell's question about 6C, is there anyone who could speak to the Harvest Hill project and where we are as far as the funding for that and when that will be moving forward with construction? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. My name is Jack Thiel, and I'm with the developer for the Harvest Hill project. And we are very, very close. We are actually within about a month or two from starting construction. So we have almost all the approvals and we're almost there. So that's it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, is that all? Any other questions from council? Seeing none, is there a motion by council that consent items 6A through 6C and 6E through 6H be approved? Councilmember Ward,
So moved.
thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen,
I second this motion.
thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, council, please cast your vote electronically. Councilmember Delgadillo, are you online? She said she might be, so if she's not, we'll move on. No? Okay, so all council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. And that passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all. Earlier this evening, it was requested that item 6D be moved to action items. As mentioned, we'll review this item now before continuing with the agenda. Item 6D is council's consideration of 3 resolutions related to the 112th and Uptown Complete Streets project. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Brian Graham is headed back down.
Hi again, Mr. Graham.
Good evening. So we did have a chance to prepare a brief presentation, and we'll just run through that and try to answer any questions that you may have. So the West 112th and Uptown project is to widen that section of roadway from its current 2-lane configuration to 4, in addition to adding bicycle lanes in some locations, as well as a side path or a multi-use path adjacent to the north and south sides of the roadway, including a crossing of the BNSF railway and a connection down to the US 36 bikeway. Next slide, please, Curtis. I didn't include all of the plan views, but this is on the western end of the project area at Wadsworth and Parkland. And from left to right is from west to east as it crosses over US 36. So here in the lower portion of the screen, you see there is a path that continues off screen down to the US 36 bikeway, and on street includes bike lanes traveling both east and west across the bridge. Next slide. This is a view of the railroad crossing. So we transitioned from a separated side path to a wide sidewalk at the crossing due to both horizontal and vertical limitations at the crossing, including the railroad control bungalow and the control arms, et cetera. And then the project continues to the east to Perry Street. Next slide, please. So before you tonight are 3 resolutions, 2 to authorize contracts with FHU for both construction administration and construction management, as well as a construction agreement with American West. And just to note, the funding for the project is about 50-50 grant funded through CDOT and DRCOG's Safer Main Streets initiative, which is a reimbursable grant, as well as local funding, which includes an extensive overmatch, which I detail on the next slide, which just is your funding table. So it's about a $7.2 million project, including that $3.5 million in the top right federal grant funding. About 500,000 of those dollars have been reimbursed already as part of the design process. Next slide, please. So the high-level project schedule is, we'll initiate all the permitting if the project is approved this evening, and be about 3 months away from starting construction this summer and concluding the project in summer 2026. Next slide. And when we understood that this was being pulled from consent, the assumption was perhaps that conversation was around federal funding. I understand that may or may not be correct. But just to review this slide, we do have the full amount budgeted in the project. Obviously, if anything were to happen with the federal funding, the revenues on the budget side would be affected, and we would need to consider alternatives, including things like shifting funding from one project to another or delaying projects up and all the way to potentially canceling the project. We do have some time before we put shovel into the ground, and both our contract that's before you as part of one of the resolutions does have an out clause, as they all do, to terminate the project and only be on the hook for the money spent thus far. That's what I had for the presentation. Be happy to answer questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We do allow public comments on this item, so if you'd like to be heard, please make your way to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. Stick around, though. They may have questions. Okay.
Roxy Jula Lackamore. This took a long time for this to even come up, that it's even going to happen. I travel this road a lot, along with hundreds of other people who travel that road. This is going to affect our travel. We need signage or something way ahead of time and given dates and stuff. And keep in mind that if you're working on both sides of the road at the same time, you're really going to affect the citizens of Broomfield. This is actually a main thoroughfare through that area. And it's for all the people who live over on the west side of 36. If they're going east, that's about the only way they can get out of there. So I'm even worried about fires and stuff. So if you got this road all jammed up, it's going to be hard to get out of there if you had to go east, because everybody's trying to go west to get on Wadsworth Boulevard. So I just think the congestion needs to be double checked once they do start working on this, and be mindful of that, because this is great that we're finally doing it, but not if it's going to be a health problem or be a dangerous situation for our community and other communities also. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. To piggyback on Ms. Jewell's statement, my kids go to the school right there, so hopefully this can be scheduled. I know it's going to take longer than the summer to do, but as much time in the construction when the school's not in session would be great. So and to that point, if dates are, as soon as dates are known, if they can be made public, so people know to stay away or plan to stay away from that area. I do have questions, and I'm glad that this was pulled off the consent agenda, because I did have questions on where the overmatch funding, why the overmatch funding. As near as I can tell, this was funded from the federal level with contract values from 2020. So because we delayed 5 years, it's now costing Broomfield $2.8 million. That seems like a really painful decision was made that we're now costing that much more, when this could have been mostly funded through CDOT and DRCOG and funding that way. Instead, now we're paying for it. And it did say that in the memo that this was an 80% federally funded program, which I see that the notes up here are correct, that it's more 50-50. And so I appreciate that was changed, but the memo was incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard? Don't see anyone online. We'll move on to questions from council. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably to some of your all's surprise, this is not pulled for me to gripe about the fact that we're widening a road. But I do have questions about the design, and I will allow Ms. Rogers, since she did do some work on researching today, to go over, I guess that'll be my first question. Given that the federal government has been reassessing how they are spending money, what is the likelihood that federal funding could be pulled from a project like this?
very unlikely. But that's speculative. There's so much unknown right now, but we think the infrastructure projects that are already in the pipeline, it is very unlikely that the funding will be pulled.
Okay, thank you. My first question on the design is, I'm happy, let me preface this. I'm happy that we are doing separated bike paths for most of the project. My concern, though, is in that section where you are bringing the bike paths onto the road and having no separation between traffic and the bikes, considering that those lanes of travel are put at a speed limit of 35 miles an hour, which is quite a bit for a car or a bus, because the Route 120 does go through there, and the Route 112. When it passes a bike, that's quite different than if a car was going, let's say, 20 miles an hour. So can we kind of go through the reasoning as to why we decided to go with that design pattern, when I get that the bridge is constrained in terms of its size, but we couldn't have done an elevated, at least, path like we were doing with the rest of the project?
Yeah, so it primarily comes down to some of the vertical elevations. So where you're getting the bike lane is primarily on the west side near Parkland, right? And I didn't prepare necessarily for these questions, you know, to look at an aerial or a street view would perhaps be helpful, but there's just constraints. And so obviously our primary objective is to provide that separated shared use path to get folks off the road where possible. And we're able to accomplish that for most of the project. Where we do have bike lanes in the west end, they're 6.5 feet wide. So there is, you know, some buffer there. I'm a cyclist. I'll be riding home to Lafayette this evening. So obviously these things are important to us to provide as much separation as possible.
Okay, well, separation, having a 6.5-foot lane is nice. There's still no physical barrier. I mean, I don't necessarily object to the fact that the bike lanes have come down onto the road. I mean, we have that on US 36 with the path crossing the bridge going over what used to be Church Lake. But there's a giant barrier there, rightfully so. Why don't we have some level of a barrier there also to prevent, you know, debris and snow and excess from going onto those lanes, which do, as we're driving, the cars push all that stuff onto the paths, and bike tires are not as robust as car tires, so they're more subject to puncture and blowout, etc. And I think that's a safety hazard. So why not have some level of a barrier there?
Where I've seen barriers between bike lanes and automobile travel lanes, you run into potentially additional maintenance issues. By separating it, it doesn't allow a street sweeper, you know, to go down a bike lane and can trap debris just, you know, in a different way. You know, ideally, all bike lanes, you know, in my mind, would be separated, elevated. But what we have to make decisions on projects, you know, where there are right-of-way constraints, vertical constraints, or other impediments to a project that are fleshed out during the design process and dictate what is possible. We also obviously have some funding issues, you know, on this project where we're overmatching it as it is. I wasn't intimately involved in the design. I'm here before you, you know, frequently presenting projects that my staff, you know, have been working on really on this project for several years. And I come to you, you know, without the full knowledge of the project, of knowing, you know, and being involved in those design meetings. And I understand that that may be a unsatisfactory response, but I know that we work toward providing the safest facilities possible within the constraints that we have, you know, placed on the projects. And, specifically why we couldn't do it in that, in each of these locations, I can't answer that.
Okay. My next question is going to be on the width of the lanes of travel for the automobiles and the rest of the traffic. Most of them are somewhere in the range of 11 feet to 12 feet. There's a few instances where they are 13 feet. Why didn't we choose to go with a 10-foot wide lane, knowing that this really is a local road? If you, in a layman's perspective, you have your highways and you have kind of your more major arterials, and everything else is a local road. This really is more of a local road. It does not really go to a main arterial like Main Street goes to 120th, or even Third Avenue goes onto Main Street. It just kind of goes over to Main Street and Old Wadsworth Boulevard. So why not go with a 10-foot wide lane, which still provides enough room for vehicles to travel through while also physically constraining them so it slows down speed and makes it safer for everyone who's walking and biking, and even in areas where they're going to be crossing the road. What, can you kind of walk me through what that?
Yeah, I
physics was?
certainly would agree that, narrower lanes tend to slow traffic. I mean, studies definitely support what you're saying. I will follow up. I believe this is a connector, and it's designed per our our design standards. So our 2022 engineering standards and specifications are that this would be an 11-foot one.
I'm going to interrupt. Katie Allen, Director of Community Development. Councilmember Ward, this, I believe, and our traffic engineer is not here tonight, but this is an arterial roadway and a designated truck route. So I believe we try to have 11-foot minimum lanes on truck routes.
Okay, thank you. Those are pretty much all my questions. I'll save comments for later.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Shap.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to make sure our public commenters' questions were answered. So one of them was around, the phasing of the construction. Do we have at this point a phasing plan for what the construction will look like on this roadway?
We don't dictate the means and methods. I know our project manager and transportation engineer who's managing this project will work with the contractor. Obviously, we have an existing two-lane, roadway that we're able to work with and utilize, to keep the roadway open. It would be a shock to me if we required any sort of full closure. That should not be necessary on a project like this. So the opportunity to maintain, that's always our number one priority, is maintaining emergency vehicle access. Will there be construction impacts? Absolutely. That happens during construction. There will be potentially lane closures or lane shifts, as the roadway is widened and the project progresses. We do have a set of, really standard operating procedure for public notification. That includes obviously a project website as well as postcards to all residences within 1,000 linear feet of the full project extents. And on a project like this, we will, typically utilize variable message boards on the roadways as well.
Excellent. So do you anticipate that there would be one lane of traffic in each direction open throughout the construction? Or do you think that there could be points at which there would just be a single lane?
I would expect, apologies for interruption. I would expect that there would be at least one lane in each direction.
In each direction. So status quo to today, of course, there's going to be construction happening around that, but status quo for what's today.
More or less, those one lanes in each direction could utilize parts of turn lanes. And there could be, lane restrictions in that regard.
Okay. And then you talked about a little bit about the communications plan, which was going to be my second question. I would assume that the Jefferson Academy would be part of that communications plan. It's not just residents, but there's a lot of businesses around that area as well that obviously would appreciate the notifications.
Yeah, and I apologize. I said all residents with in 1,000 feet, but that would be all, all properties, including the school. Unfortunately, the extent of the project and the scope of the project would dictate that, unfortunately, we can't just do this all over the summer.
Right.
So there will be impacts to school traffic.
And we know that, from public comment tonight, as well as, my personal experience, before school, after school, and then, after work hours, that tends to be a pretty congested time along that route. Do we anticipate that construction would work with those kind of times to ensure that those lanes continued to be open and that they weren't impacted during that time?
Yes and no. Our standards allow construction between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Typically, where we're working near a school, we have success collaborating with the contractor to limit impacts during those pickup and drop off times. And there also, we place restrictions on when lane closures or full closures, obviously, which we don't anticipate on this project, can happen, through our permitting process. But in order to get the project done on this timeline, we can't guarantee that no work would be happening, during some of these times.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the last question is regarding the overmatch portion of the funds. Was this, with that new kind of price point for this project and with the federal funding and the local match, it brought it more to a 50-50 instead of the 80-20 that we anticipated with that grant funding. The kind of reasoning for that overmatch, was it just due to those price escalations that we've seen on a lot of our CIP projects in that timeline? Or did we add additional things to that project that were outside of that grant funding that we wanted to take care of along with this project as well?
I think with the grant application in 2019, it was awarded in 2020. So we're talking several years ago. Obviously, you recognize the cost of inflation and the cost of doing business, unfortunately, has increased since then. The grant application is based on a cost estimate, again, that is pre-designed, and we try to do our best to request, the money that we think is necessary to complete the project. And then we go into design and understand the real costs of a project. So part of that is an inability to estimate precisely as part of a grant application from 6 years ago, pre-design, and part of that are due to cost increases or escalations, not due to the expansion of scope.
Great. Well, thank you for answering those questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Marsh Holson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of follow-up questions to Councilmember Ward's questions on the bike lanes. The portion that doesn't have the separated bike lane, it's not just the 6 foot next to the road. A lot of communities like Boulder have started doing just very narrow, just basically curbing with those the flexible barriers. To just visualizing that, it doesn't seem to take up a lot of space. Is that something that could be added to this project relatively inexpensively, or is it something that we could possibly add at a later time?
I am relatively familiar with some of the separation techniques that the city of Boulder is piloting. I have not had any sort of conversation with any of their traffic engineers, but I do understand those to be pilots. They're testing flexible bollards, more typical type 3 barricades, lower concrete separators. And I'm not sure what they would say in terms of the results of those, both from a safety perspective, but as well as a maintenance. I've personally witnessed a lot of those being damaged, by automobile traffic. On one hand, you might say, well, maybe that protected someone, and maybe it did. On the other hand, it becomes then just a continuing cost of maintenance.
And that's my follow-up question to that is these other communities have done dedicated bike lanes and they have to plow snow and do all this type of maintenance, ongoing stuff. Do we know what the estimated additional cost of annual maintenance on those type of?
I do not.
Okay. All right. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, Will the clerk, first is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2025-46. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
6D, Resolution Number 2025-46, approving a construction agreement with American West Construction LLC for the 112th and Uptown Complete Streets Project.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Ward.
I move the resolution to be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Council Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to start off by saying I appreciate all the work that staff did. I think overall this project is needed, and the work you guys did was not only great, but it was impressive. I mean, dealing with BNSF, the freight railroad that crosses there, sometimes it feels like it takes an act of Congress just to get them to communicate with you. And even that they might disregard. But I do want to take the time to say that I think there is still room for improvement with this project and with projects going forward. There is no reason we should not be putting the safety of bikes and pedestrians at or above the level of convenience we put for maintenance of streets. I'm really sick of hearing maintenance is the problem because for having protected infrastructure for bikes, we can figure out a way around that. There is no price we can put on someone's life or any injury that they may sustain from having an accident due to contact with a car or any of the debris that might accumulate in these bike lanes. So I just want to take the time to say we should be doing better in the future. I know there are some things that we have in our code that state, lanes have to be a certain width, et cetera. I know we implemented that in 2022. I disagreed with that policy decision in 2022, and I'm going to continue to disagree with it until it's changed. But overall, I will be supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, council, please cast your vote electronically. Is Councilmember Delgadillo? She on? No, okay, we're just gonna skip that. We'll skip that. Council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. And that passes unanimously 9-0. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2025-47. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
6D, Resolution Number 2025-47, approving a consulting agreement with Felsberg, Holt, and Ulavig, Inc. for construction management services for the 112th and Uptown Complete Streets Project.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Wynn.
I second this motion.
Any discussion? Seeing none, council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously 9-0. Next is council's consideration to proposed resolution number 2025-48. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
6D, Resolution Number 2025-48, approving the Fourth Amendment to the consulting agreement with Felsberg, Holt, and Ulavig, Inc. for the 112th and Uptown Complete Streets Project.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Wynn.
I make this motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
In a flip, I will second the motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, council members, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That also passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all very much. Next under action items is council's consideration on first reading of proposed ordinance number 2263 related to a Broomfield Town Square Business Improvement District. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Jeff Romine is going to briefly introduce us to this issue, and I know that BTS reps are here as well. Mr. Romine.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman, Mayor Pro Tem Council members. I'm Jeff Romine. I'm the economist for the City and County of Broomfield, and the person before you talking about this next step in the Broomfield Town Square development.
So next slide, please. As Manager Hoffman pointed out, the applicant or the proposer of the bid is also here making a presentation. In the council's presentation folder, you saw two presentations. In some cases, there was a little duplication, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly and skip a few slides as we go because the applicant will be talking about them a little bit. So very briefly, this is another step of the multiple steps, 3 component parts of the finance related to the Broomfield Town Square, which was approved and agreed to in 2019. So this is another one of those action steps coming before council. Next slide, please. The bid is a legal governmental entity, so we are creating a district. City Council has the authority to create districts within the community, at which point it becomes its independent government. So I just wanted to lay that kind of framework to you. They do have certain powers, including imposing taxes, providing services, et cetera. The applicant or the proposer will talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure. And the formation of the bid is by ordinance after the receipt of petitions for not less than 50% of the property owners. If you may recall, there was one of the steps within the redevelopment agreement was a transfer of property. That transfer of property was completed roughly 2 weeks ago, at which point now there is a successful applicant and they have now petitioned. Next slide, please. This talks about the fact that we did transfer that property, and now there are 5 members of that who have successfully or have suggested and petitioned for this. The parcel, this is just one portion, and I just want to make this very clear to council. This is just one portion of the Broomfield Town Square physical area that we're talking about. It is at the corner of Main and First. It is the northeast corner of that intersection. And so it's just one portion. Eventually, the rest of the property will be moved over into their ownership, at which point they'll likely come before council and ask for a change in the business improvement district in order to include all of the property. So I just wanted to make that mention. Next slide, please. The real key one here is number 3 on this, because Megan and Tim will talk a little bit about some of the details that are in these slides, but I just wanted to mention that property that we already identified. You can also see the map in their presentation if you wanted to identify that. So I just wanted to reference that so you could look at that map in that specific location. Next slide, please. In addition to setting up the bid, the formation of the bid is you will also be approving the 2025 and 2026 budget, which is estimated to be at $50,000 annually for the next 2 years. And so it is a very small budget because, of course, there's not much going on there yet. So the development, once it comes forward, the bid will really activate at that point and strongly begin to move forward with some of the work that they need to do. But this is getting it all started to some degree. So I just wanted to point out that there is a scope of services that they're talking about and is identified. And again, the applicant will be talking briefly about that in their presentation. Next slide, please. This is one of those that I do want to hit a little bit deeper into. So the maximum debt authorized under the operating plan and budget is $104 million. And that we're going to talk a little bit about that just for a second. And that is the way that we have come together on this particular aspect of the development is there already is a metro district, which City Council did authorize and form previously. And so together, these two financing approaches are coming together. And what you will note is we have set the maximum cap at 50 mils for the 2 of them combined for the debt mills, and then a combined 15 mils for the operations side. So what they'll be able to do is think of these as 2 different districts, potentially could be on top of each other. And so there's a maximum level both to the debt as well as the mill levies. And it's something that we talked with the Broomfield Town Square Alliance partners as well, or developer, as well as they've been getting to form it. The other point at the very bottom is you'll notice the allowable interest rate for that future debt. This mirrors the other debt that has been approved in this case. So this is keeping everything consistent and follows the same protocols that we've approved before. Next slide, please. So Mayor and members of council and Mayor Pro Tem, proposed ordinance number 2263, if approved, identifies and finds petition meets the statutory requirements, establishes the Broomfield Town Square bid, establishes and names the board of directors, and creates a temporary boundary. This is the boundary for the bid, which will eventually be changed at your approval, and then also approves the 25 and 26. Next slide. Before I turn it over to our colleagues, the developers, I just want to talk briefly about next steps because we've talked about it and we wanted to just foreshadow what's coming on March 25th. So 1 month from today, or 24 weeks from today, I guess it is still 1 month. City Council will be asked to consider this on second reading, to do those same things again. But in addition to that, that same night, Borough and City Council will be talking about the URA and the formation and the amendment to the URA for that area. This is that third step of the financing that we're talking about, that next step after this. And that'll be coming forward. The Borough will be considering it the same night as City Council, and so both of those will be coming forward. So that's foreshadowing how this all fits together. And it's something that we've communicated with Council before, but I just wanted to reiterate that point. At this point, I'm going to pause, step away, and turn it over to the applicant and proposer of the bid. Megan and Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Roman.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Megan Becker. I am general counsel for the applicant in this case. Happy to be here tonight. I will also go through and try to highlight and not repeat what Jeff just went over, but obviously we'll be here for questions. Tim Frederick with the applicant is here, and we also have Tim Morzell with DA Davidson, which is the company that helped put together the finance plan for both the Metro districts and the Business Improvement District. So hopefully we can answer any of your questions tonight. If we could go to the next slide. Jeff just went over requested City Council action, which is we will be here a month from today asking for finding that the petition for organization was sufficient and for approval of the organization of the bid. So we can go to the next slide. And we also went over much of this. So we obviously had the prior land transfer, which allowed us to be here tonight. And prior to that, zoning approval was in 2022, site plan approval in 2023, redevelopment reimbursement agreement before all that in 19, Metro districts. I can't believe that that was 2020, but holy cow, it's been a couple of years since then. So we're here today to move forward with the bid, which, as Jeff mentioned, is our next step along with the urban renewal plan, which will both be in front of you in 4 weeks. We can go to the next slide. As Jeff was mentioning, so the initial boundaries, you can see they're hatched in red. That is approximately, well, just over 3 acres now owned by the 5 individuals that will be the initial board of directors for the bid, assuming approval occurs on the 25th. As Jeff mentioned, in order for those boundaries to expand, it will be done over time, and we'll be back to see you to make that request when it occurs. In all likelihood, and the plan is that this is done in accordance with takedown of the property and determination of land use. So, but initially to get the bid organized and begin to move forward, this is where we're starting. So if we can move to the next slide. This is all the legal stuff. Statutory provision that governs organization of the bid. Starts with the petition, which is executed by the owners. That was provided last week, so that has been formally submitted and starts our timeline for getting approval of you guys and getting to the election in May, which is why we're here at this point. Governing document is the proposed operating plan and budget, which was also included in your packet. That contains all the statutorily required information for you all to consider. The powers are listed in that document. They align with what the statute authorizes. It is slightly different, and I'd say a little bit more expansive than a metropolitan district because it's specifically related to commercial property and business activities. So that's why we have both the metropolitan district and the business improvement district. The business improvement district will only be on those commercial properties in the future, which is another reason we need to do it in a phased approach so that we only place it on the properties that will definitively and only be commercial in the future. Revenues derived will be through the ad valorem tax, which we'll dig into a little bit more specifics in a couple slides, service charges and fees, potentially special assessments, and then through bonds that will be supported by those revenues. 5-member board of directors will be the same as the current Metropolitan District. Those are the 5 individuals that own the property now within this initial boundary. And will be initially appointed by you upon approval of the ordinance. An election is required for the issuance of general obligation debt, again, which is why we're here now, to time it with that May election that is upcoming. So we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. We talked about these. We can levy and collect taxes with the limitations we'll discuss, issue debt that's secured by those taxes, impose and collect fees and assessments, enter into contracts and agreements, acquire, construct, finance, and install the public infrastructure that's allowed by the statute and the operating plan. And what's a little bit different with the bid than the Metro District is the authorization to promote activity, marketing, management of events, and activities in support of business development. That's something that a Metro District does not have because the Metro District can hold both residential and commercial. If we go to the next slide, please. So we talked about each of these, operating plan and 25-26 budget. It's a very basic budget that we've included for now. Were revisions proposed, or if we're able to move more quickly, we'll be back to put that in front of you and show that to you. At this point, given the status of development, we just want to get the Business Improvement District organized, hold the election so that we're poised to move forward as soon as we can. And as soon as is warranted. Annually, we'll bring forward the plan for the next year and the budget for the next year by September 30th. So every year at a minimum, you'll see that at least once coming before you. And the bid must act within the parameters of what's approved in that annual budget. So you'll see that at least once every year. If we go to the next slide. In cooperation with Metro Districts, as Jeff mentioned, these are financing mechanisms that are intended to work together to provide all the services, activities, and infrastructure that is planned for the development. And so our initial cost estimate, you'll see, as was included in the operating plan, aligns with what was approved for the Metropolitan District, so that all of those things are working in concert, and we recognize that that's necessary. The bid will be authorized to own, operate, and maintain any public improvements that are not being dedicated to another governmental entity. So to the extent improvements don't go to the city, to the extent they're not maintained by the district, the Metro District, the bid will have that authorization. So the goal is to get everyone to work in concert and to have the right infrastructure, the right activity with the right entity. If we go to the next slide. As Jeff mentioned, it's a combined finance plan. So what you see in the operating plan that's in front of you is a finance plan, just as it was shown with the Metro District, is a combined finance plan here with the bid. And in that, the debt limit that we're asking for in the operating plan here is the same debt limit in aggregate as the Metropolitan District. So that 104 million applies to the Metro Districts and the bid in the aggregate, so that it's not on top of each other, it's all of them working together. It is the debt service mills that are allowed are a maximum of 50 mills, only subject to adjustment if we see legislative changes, which we've seen lots of those in the last couple of years. But again, in the aggregate, so that there isn't an overburden of mill levy imposition on any property. So in this case, we likely will have an overlap of a commercial Metropolitan District with the bid. In aggregate, the debt mill levy for those properties still can't exceed 50 mills. It's not on top of one another. The operations mill is maximum of 15 mills, again, only adjusted for authorized statutory or constitutional changes. We can go to the next slide. That's it. Oh, sorry.
No.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much.
Mayor, that concludes both the staff presentation as well as the proposers. Both Carl and I are here on behalf of the staff to answer any questions, as well as people from the bid as well as the developer. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you both so much. We'll now proceed with public comment, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please make your way to the podium. Seeing none, we'll go to questions from council, starting with Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the question for the developer, actually. The main question I have is, when is this going to start? This development is in my ward. I've been part of this conversation for a long time. I've been one of the, I would say, one of the most, energetic cheerleaders on council that this get done. I want to see it get done. Assuming we approve this tonight in the URA in a few weeks, when are you going to ground break?
Tim Frederill, first off, Broomfield Town Square Alliance. Thank you for the question. As quickly as possible is our short answer. Right now, you're looking at multiple months of construction documents still to complete, as well as permitting thereafter. So we're looking at 12 months if we're racing at a pretty good clip to break ground on the district infrastructure. We continue to progress the district construction documents. I believe I gave a council update, I think it was 2 months ago, just keeping you briefed on where the actual nuts and bolts engineering lies with the project. We continue to progress those construction documents as well as our financing. And this gives us one more tool to move forward with the bond raise, which would fund that public infrastructure. Again, 12 months is a reasonable estimate of timeline for that bond sale.
I appreciate that. I remember when we approved the site development plan, that's probably close to 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it was September, yeah.
I remember being told that it was going to be roughly 12 months of construction documents. And now you're telling me 2 years later that it's going to be another 12 months. Is the construction documents the only thing holding us up? I mean, if you had the construction documents done tomorrow, would you be able to break ground the day after? Obviously, that's not.
Yeah, financing is another piece to it. So this hearing today assists with us completing the public infrastructure financing. And then the private financing is also a component to break ground. And those efforts are also underway. We're processing a HUD 221D4 application, which we should be submitting in the near future for both the apartment and active adult community. So financing, construction documents, permitting, bond sale, all those things combined. But rest assured, I mean, we have not stopped work on the construction documents on the district infrastructure. We're doing what we can to move the project forward. Agreed, it's taken longer than we'd hoped. I can sense your frustration. We're frustrated as well. We continue to push. We're not getting paid. This is all a decade-long effort of goodwill at this point, and we really want this project to go. So we're not going to stop it until it goes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Lim.
Yes, could you explain to me, in the plan, and the plan that was submitted with this bid, on page 34, it makes it look like the financing bonds are not planned by the developer to come forward until December of 2026. That seems very delayed.
I'll have to ask for a little bit of assistance from DA Davidson, our bond underwriter here. I think the financial plans are generally just on an annual basis. So I think that's my best guess is it's pegging it to the year 2026, not so much the date of December 31st, 2026. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Happy to respond to that. Tim Morzell with D.A. Davidson, acting as the underwriter here for this transaction, for a future transaction. When we're putting together these financing plans, obviously we're solving for a cap, looking at maximum mill levy, maximum proceeds potentially, establishing a cap for the service plan and operating plan for the bid. These are general assumptions. I mean, we understand that the goal is to go to market sometime in 2026. For these models, a December date works cleanly, so that's what we assume, and it generally doesn't have a significant impact on what we're showing in terms of capacity.
Okay. Sorry, and just to jump in there, and what will be authorized then by allowing the district to move forward with the organization and the election in May of this year, we will have the authorizations we need as the district to move forward at any point that works. So if we're able to move sooner, we have the voted authority, we have the operating plan in place that we can come forward at any point. As both the Tims mentioned, that was just an assumption that makes it cleaner to get a finance plan to show what we needed to show for you, but we'll have the authorization at any point after May.
I was a little concerned, knowing that the transfer of property, that requirement is fulfilled either by the construction starting at the end of 26 or the bonds just being issued. I was a little concerned when I saw the late date on the bonds, which looked like a delay to me, that this was the developer somehow indicating, we're not so sure we're going to start. We're going to have that construction started by the end of 2026.
What I'd say is we're here now because we want to get going as fast as we can, which is why we want the election in May. So purely an assumption in that bid document. And again, being able to be here now, have the election in May. If we were able to move forward in 2025, we would have the authorization to do that. So not related and not intended to give that assumption.
Okay. My other question is it the developer's intention to bring forward additions to the bid with the transfer of property in small pieces, large chunks? And is there a requirement then that whatever you start constructing with the infrastructure, whatever section that you start with the infrastructure needs to be in the bid when you start that construction?
I'll give the general response and then I'll let Tim jump in as well. In order to expand the boundaries of the bid, we need to have a final determination of property use. So there is some action necessary at the city so we can make sure that anything that is going to be residential gets segregated and does not come in. So that will allow us to bring in portions of property. So it kind of depends what portions are designated at each point. To the extent we're able to get large designations, larger portions can come in at once. So it just kind of depends how that phasing works. I don't know if Tim, there's anything you want to add on that.
Yeah, good question. And if you recall, the site plan approval that was a little over a year ago is for the first phase of Broomfield Town Square. The zoning approval, which was 2 years ago, encompassed the larger area, including Lot 6, which is the area by the library, as well as the area south of the former Safeway building, which has additional development potential. Where I'm going with that is it'll be large chunks, likely large chunks of inclusions into the BID boundaries. And those would be two significant milestones where you'd see a chunk. So in the preparation to sell bonds, the bulk of the property that's going to be in that phase 1 business improvement district boundary will come back for inclusion of those areas in the BID at that time. So it'll be one big chunk. We don't want to tax it and just have continuous incremental additions to the BID boundaries.
Okay, so in my agreement with Councilmember Marsh-Holshin that we are waiting to see this move forward with the construction, then we will have some indication how quickly you are moving forward just by the fact that we are seeing the pieces being requested going into the bid.
Oftentimes the inclusions happen on the run up to the bond sale. So in the weeks immediately prior to issuing debt, we will be requesting, the way the redevelopment and reimbursement agreement works is we will petition for transfer of the property. Say, let's just name a parcel like the lot, the Safeway lot. We would request transfer of that land. Whoever owns that land would need to be working with us in the immediate run up to bond sale to to include that property within the BIDs. The property owner has to be part of the process and, right?
Yep.
I'm doing this all right. So, and that's usually in the immediate weeks prior to bond issuance.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Welcome.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Like many council members here, I'm excited and I want to hear the updates of the Broomfield Town Square. And so I really only just have one question, and it's on the number that was presented with the estimated cost of $68 million and with the bid being no maximum debt authorization for $104 million. I guess my question is, these numbers sound very large. And I guess I just want to know, like, what entails in the estimates, and is there a chance that this will increase as we go down to the construction and design phase?
The budget included in the financing plan is intended to be broader than we ultimately may see come to fruition. We don't want to have to go back through this process and ask for higher debt thresholds. So there are line items within that budget which contemplate future public improvements in subsequent phases of the Broomfield Town Square, whether there's debt capacity for that or not. The reality is the debt issuance likely is below the numbers you're seeing, probably by a significant threshold. However, we need to be prepared for all circumstances here, and it would be doing us a disservice if we did not include the possible financing of those additional public improvements, and then have to go through this process all again.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Clearly, there will be some infrastructure projects. Some roads have already been cleared. We did already, the roofing on the former Safeway Center already. I understand that to make it the best possible venue, you're going to have some costs that are going to be required for infrastructure for roads, et cetera. And I guess that kind of follows my next question is, when we do have two different districts, is that going to be beneficial for the construction project? Because for me, it does sound like we're adding extra layers, and I'm concerned that, that will cause delays. But from what I understand, it's actually going to be beneficial.
That's correct. Yeah, as you heard earlier, the business improvement districts do have additional powers under the statute. This project is intended to be a place, and it's intended to be activated. So the part we're most excited about is its ability to activate the space with events, music, movie nights, farmers markets. One of the tools that the business improvement district has that metropolitan districts do not. They also have some additional financial tools at their disposal, such as public improvement fees. And again, just the ability to spend some dollars in different places where metro districts cannot. So the complexity does not cause us any alarm. We have done 3 different bond issuance in the past 5 years with both metropolitan districts and business improvement districts. We're comfortable with the structure. They don't overlap legally, so the legal boundaries when the project is completed of metropolitan districts and business improvement districts will be distinct, so you don't have overlapping mill levies. And the boards of the two will be a similar cast of board members as well. So the hearings and regular cadence of our BID and Metropolitan District Board meetings, they usually stagger them so that they're one occurring immediately following the other. And then finally, you have typically where you have both of the structures present, both BIDs and Metropolitan Districts, one is carrying the load and the other has basically just pledged its revenues to the other. So it may be that the business improvement district is the one that's effectively signing any contracts related for services around the district, snow removal, landscaping, signing an events contract. It may be that the business improvement district is that lead party that's the one contracting for virtually all services within the district. And the metropolitan district may have very minimal scope. So you usually are picking one of the 2 different structures, again, to be the lead and to be sort of the face of the activities within the district, as well as the issuer of the debt. I don't know if I'm leaving anything out.
Yeah, I guess what I would just add to that is it allows us to be as efficient as possible with the revenues that we're receiving in different ways. So we tend to find that particularly in these mixed use developments, that's what the result is efficiency in getting the right entity to do the right job to provide what we're hoping to provide.
And Megan, if I may, Councilmember Wynn, think about it as a birthday cake.
Yeah.
That has multi-layers. Each one presents an opportunity for the developer to get funding. Each one of those layers is a different flavor by which it can do something else. So you have your urban renewal, which gives you tax increment financing. You have your bid, you have your metro districts. Each one allows for you to eventually get to the top where there's frosting, to where you actually take money off. Until then, from the bottom to the top, all of those layers are to build money so that you can bond to do the project.
I appreciate the analogy with the birthday cake. That is very, makes me want more. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So last month, we lost Dana Crawford, visionary for Brimfield in Colorado, someone who had a major hand in the beginning stages of this project. So just wanted to offer condolences to her family as well as you all that have been a part of this project and worked with her in those early stages. Of course, the question I get the most about this project is the same as Councilmember Marsh Holshan, which is when is this project going to happen? So I thank you for a little bit more insight into when that's going to happen. One of the needed aspects of this project is around financing, which I believe the bid will play a role. When do you anticipate that bond issuance for this project?
The bond issuance, we would consider the launch of the project, the start of the project. That's going to be like when we're setting off fireworks and this thing is going. And again, it's a reasonable estimate to think that the bond issuance could be in 12 months.
We discussed the increased costs to projects earlier tonight. I don't think that you guys are any stranger to that knowledge. And the added financing that is needed. What other financing options will you need to move forward with this project beyond the Metro District, the bid that we're considering tonight? What other financing options are still yet to be determined with this project?
At this point, for the public infrastructure, we're not contemplating any other, excuse me. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the urban renewal plan as it relates to our tax increment finance package. Thank you. But we've already voted on the redevelopment and reimbursement agreement and the sales and property tax sharing from within the project boundaries, but we still must, proceed with the adoption of the urban renewal plan in a month. That's all fairly well laid out before you. But as far as gap financing, like any other source of financing that may be needed for the public infrastructure, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we don't have any other tools or layers to the cake. I love that analogy. Aside from one I'm going to be hearing more about from your own Jeff Romine next week. Next week or 2 weeks? No, March 4th. Where are we at? Yeah, a little over a week from today, Jeff's going to introduce to us a different tool that I've never heard of, but Jeff has some experience with that may offer some assistance here. So at this point, that's just investigation, but you've heard the tools that we're contemplating using: Metropolitan District, Business Improvement District, Tax Increment Finance, all of those tools, all of those revenue streams feeding into a bond sale.
Great, thank you. And I asked this question last time you all were here. Do you anticipate requesting any additional financing from the city and county of Brimfield?
We pray not, but as we've noted with schedule, the preparation of the plans for this project in this inflationary environment is an iterative process. And what we're working on diligently is to make sure that this project comes in on budget. Until we have a final set of construction documents and a permit approval from the city and a construction contract that ties to that number, we don't have 100% certainty. And so yes, indeed, the construction documents are taking additional time than we'd hope. That's because in this environment, fortunately, you don't get to do it once, you get to do it a couple times until the number is right. So it's the best I can answer the question. Is we're working on doing everything we can to refine the plans, from, you know, the type of pipe we're using to the type of finish on a sidewalk to make sure that the budget comes in line.
Okay. So that was a little bit more of a squishy answer than Mr. Vostridge gave last time he was here, which was no, that you all don't anticipate any requests for financing from the city and county of Broomfield. So I don't believe that any financing, direct financing from the city and county of Broomfield was a part of the 2019 financing agreement. Is that correct?
No, I do believe there may have been a provision about the developer could approach the city and county if needed, but I don't recall there being a specific additional tool within that agreement.
Okay. I see Mr. Romine behind you.
I'm gonna answer that one really simply, and the answer is no. So they would have to come back to council and request whatever that gap financing is, whether it be because of inflation or delay or scope or one of the other many reasons. But there's not a provision in there that would preclude them from coming back to council asking for additional funds to cover any gaps.
Okay, thank you for clarifying the answer and my question, because that was my question is what would be that mechanism? And the last question I have is around with the bond issuance and financing. It seems like there's an issue for the school districts. Have the school districts committed all their mills needed for this project? You know, and this is kind of within the current climate within the state. You know, there's the school funding aspect, which I think this last year they were finally able to eliminate that negative factor. But given that there's a $1 billion deficit of the state budget and the potential for no backfill to school districts from the state, what is that current status for those mills being dedicated from the school districts to this project?
Mayor Pro Tem council members, as we speak, or maybe earlier tonight, Boulder Valley School District was considering the request for their participation in the URA through their commitment of mills. It is our understanding, I have not obviously seen what they voted on and what they approved, is our understanding that they were considering what oftentimes are referred to as the base mills. And so in every school district, oftentimes there are additional mills that have been approved by the voters for things like technology or abatement of buildings or other things. So it is our understanding that BVSD is right now considering the base mill contribution. All the other letters of commitment will be provided from the other districts as required for the URA. And so all of that will be coming before council, Mayor, in 1 month. So you'll see it in your council packets as tradition 3 weeks from now, because it'll be in a week in advance. So I hope that answers your question.
That does. Thank you very much. Mayor, that's all the questions I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to echo the Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Marsh-Holson, I can relay interest in this project is quite high. And even in Ward 5, I had a resident just last week ask me if the council can't we just apply some thumb screws to the developers and get this done? So reflects kind of the interest and frustration, but I know that we've had a whole epidemic go through it from the time this was approved and now to this point, which probably had something to do with taking this long. But looking ahead, you know, we're speaking the here and now, and we're not sure what the situation for the year ahead is going to bring. How confident can we be that in a year from now we'll be actually groundbreaking, or what things should we be on the lookout that might derail this or delay us further in terms of the economy or any other developments that we can't foresee?
I'd say economy's number one. Closing financing, not only the bond sale, but construction loan, you know, equity commitment of tens of millions of dollars is number one considerations. What is the yield present in the environment? And treasury rates have swung 300 basis points over the past 3 years, which is that's going to like take your budget from 1x to 2x. So those are the types of moves we're seeing just over the past 3 years. So that's the number one risk I see for moving forward is I think we see a positive trend right now. I think things are moving in the right direction on long-term bond yields. So that's very favorable for our bond financing, and we just need that trend to continue. If something explodes, it heads the wrong way, and that adds additional risk. So.
And then the other question is, we can't control that, what will happen nationally, internationally.
Yep.
Hopefully you'll be back here the year with a spade.
Yep.
But if you aren't, I mean, is there anything other than financing that would stop you from being back here ready to break ground?
No.
And is there anything, I don't know if Mr. Romine, is the council's hands tied in terms of if you guys come back and you're not ready? We just have to be a waiting game? That's the role we're in at this point?
Yeah, I guess I can just speak to, what are the remaining risks? It's literally just complete the construction documents. The only thing we can do as a development team is can control what we can control, continue to progress the construction documents, continue to make smart decisions that are going to offer the best value and bring the budget in line. And then put your head down and go. Push this forward, push the business improvement district forward, push the urban renewal plan forward, control what we can control, take care of every last thing that we know that's, something that's outside of our purview. So that, apologize, I missed the second or forgot the
That's
second part of
fine.
the question.
I just asked maybe if there was a hiccup in the future, we'd love to be apprised and aware of what your status is and what progress you've made.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilmember Cohen, I think that's one of the most important things that we'll do in 2025 is to continue to have the quarterly updates. Even if those updates are, nothing has happened. We know that plenty is happening by March 18th when they come back to talk about the URA. I know a lot of folks are tracking what's happening at the federal level, but what will impact Broomfield and surrounding communities more quickly is the $1.5 billion deficit that's at the state right now. And the reason that's as impactful, and even more so, is because of the school district. Mayor Pro Tem, your question was spot on. So in urban renewal areas, school districts that are included in the urban renewal area dedicate a certain portion. As Mr. Romine was stating, that's part of their conversation tonight. The developer has indicated that they need all of the mills from the school district, so it's about $20 million. That's another one of those layers in that layer cake when you're talking about TIF is the school districts. Historically, urban renewal areas got backfill from the state. So in other words, the state have been proponents, if you will, of urban renewal. And the way they make that happen is any decrease that the school district sees, the state pays that backfill to keep them whole, historically. When we're looking at that $1 billion hole, those are draconian cuts that we are about to see, including the schools to varying degrees. So the likelihood of continuing to have at least 100% of backfills that the schools have become accustomed to are fragile at best. So when we're looking at those shifting pieces, it's not only what's outside of our control, but it's kind of the right in front of us as well. So interestingly, that week is going to be a big week. So the Joint Budget Committee begins their work after the governor's staff and the legislative staff come together and they say, where are you on the budget? What do your numbers look like? And then they present to the Joint Budget Committee to say, this is what you are dealing with as we move forward. That's all happening that week. So we'll know what that outcome is on Monday prior to them coming on Tuesday on the 18th for the urban renewal area. And by then we'll have a much better sense of what the outcome tonight from the school district is.
Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to go back because both Jennifer and Tim have answered the broader question. I wanted to go back to Councilmember Cohen's question specifically. there is one last step that city council has to take under the 2019 agreement. It's the last step of everything that the city can do to encourage and facilitate the development of this project, and that is the URA that will be considered on the 25th. After that, the city council has fulfilled every part of the agreement, and the city has. And so we've done everything we can do to encourage and stimulate this development. And so I just wanted to go back to your question, Councilman Cohen, to say, you are correct. The city, the council has done everything. So at this point, then it becomes on the developer to move forward.
Questions to come from council? All right, seeing none. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2263. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
7A ordinance number 2263 declaring the organization of the Broomfield Town Square Business Improvement District, establishing and appointing a board of directors, and approving the 2025 and 2026 operating plan and budget.
Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and order published in full? Councilmember Marcholson?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Leslie?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2263. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote, and the results will be displayed on the screen in a moment. That passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all very much. We'll see you next month. All right, looking at the time, it's 8 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and take our 10-minute recess, and we'll be back at 8:11. Welcome back. And we're coming up to our final item under action items this evening. It's council's consideration of a resolution related to the 2025 water line replacement construction contract award. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Our fearless champion, Ken Rutt, is tackling some health stuff. So our second fearless leader, Jeff Ruger, gets the pleasure of walking us through and introducing us to this item. After a 48-hour marathon of getting a broken pipe fixed. And we are very grateful as I look into the back, and Sean is back there as well. And the good news is all of our folks are safe because it was quite a harrowing event. Mr. Ruger, please introduce us to this item.
Manager Halfman, thank you for the introduction. Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Jeff Ruger, Deputy Director of Public Works. I do want you all to know that Ken is either listening or watching where he is at right now. And he was texting me prior to, so I had to.
Mr. Ruger, we threatened that we would go to IT and turn all of his stuff off. Mr. Mudd?
I hope he's.
We're on the
laughing where he's
countdown.
at.
Mr. Rudd, as you're listening to this.
So the 2025 Waterline project, the infrastructure, the Broomfield distribution system has many assets. We've learned this last year with the rate increases, AECOM and that type of thing. This waterline, the pipe materials that we maintain in the city and county of Broomfield is about 447 miles. There's two types. There's transmission, which are larger lines, which transport the water across town to tanks, that type of thing. And then, of course, you have your distribution mains, which pretty much run throughout the residential areas to service homes and that type of thing. These lines are anywhere from 36-inch to 6-inch. And the pipe inventories that we maintain are cast iron, ductile iron, steel, PVC, and poly. First three are metallic and the last two are plastic. We don't use a lot of poly. That pipe has the ability in cold weather to shrink, which can pull out of joints and that type of thing and cause problems. So PVC, if you drive by a lot of new developments, you'll see the blue pipe out there. Those are the PVCs. They're more susceptible to our soils. We have corrosive soils in Broomfield. So of course the metallic pipes, the first three that I named, are the ones that have the biggest troubles and need to be replaced over time. They have a lifespan of anywhere about 50 to 75 years. And our criteria, we start seeing things happen in about the 50-year range. And the streets that we are providing on this year's waterline replacement are 12-inch and 20-inch. And they are both metallic and they are starting to show the corrosion and failure rates. And with the bigger lines, you run into the problem of, think of it like Westlake Drive is, I'm jumping ahead. I'm going to continue down and we'll get to the two lines we're going to replace. But storage tanks, we use those to have consistent water pressure. We use storage for peak demands and of course fire flow and in emergencies. We have extra storage. We have about 6, 12, 15 million gallons of storage in the city and county of Broomfield. Throughout the distribution system, there are 81 pressure regulating valves. They maintain 18 pressure zones around town. Unfortunately, Broomfield has the rolling hills, so you have lower pressure on top and you have the very high pressures down in the lower sections. You need those PRVs to have a consistent 60 to 80 PSI. Those too can result in pipe water line failures. If those pressure regulating valves fail and the pipe's in a bad condition, it will pop holes in the pipe. There's over 14, I'm just going to go on averages. There's about 15,000 valves in the system. Valves isolate sections of main. And sorry, I forgot to ask you to change the slide. Thank you. 15,000 valves. Usually intersections is where you'll find the isolation valves, so you can go a block wide. So if we have a water main failure on a street, those are usually the two valves will shut to isolate. So usually in intersections, you'll see a lot of circular valves that go about 4 or 5 feet deep to isolate the valves. We have 5 water booster stations in town, and in those 5 stations, we have 23 pumps that help transfer water across town. We got a west zone and an east zone, and we also have a couple of zones that we pump water into because they're far enough, far enough away that we need to distribute the water in those zones with pumps. There's over 23,000 water meters. Those can range from most residential, which is our largest quantity, from 3/4 inch up to about 6 inch in businesses and that type of thing. Fire hydrants, we have over 4,400 fire hydrants. We use those for flushing and water quality. In April, we'll have our spring flush. We like to go through the system, get all the sediments and those type of things that have settled out over the winter. A quick flush for water quality. If we don't do that, then if there's like sweepers that move through town, they go on a hydrant, they stir the water up. We get a lot of residential calls because the water's dirty. It's safe. It's just, it can get a little dirty. The key reasons for replacing water line, especially corrosion, aging, size of pipe, size of areas that the outage, we don't want a lot of residents to go out of water. We have some tier violations. If we put more than 100 people out of water at a time, we haven't reached that in the years I've been here. Usually the distribution valving limits it to not so many residents being out, but also water pressure, freezing, thawing cycles. We have mean seasons in Broomfield. What that means is fall and early spring, ground changes because you have the freezing temperatures that go deep into the ground. That kind of moves the earth a little bit. And if those pipes aren't properly bedded, they'll find the weak spots on the mains also. Water quality issues, of course, we're regulated by the CDPHE in the state, so we want to make sure they're all regulatory. And then pressure fluctuations can happen in the system. Like I mentioned earlier, if somebody pulls off of a hydrant to fill a sweeper or something like that, if they open that hydrant too fast and close it, that sends a hammer in the system. Or we have a valve or at a pump station, if we lose power and it's pumping across town and that power goes out, that pump just stops. That sends a wave of pressure through the system too. So those are not good. Key reason for placing water district is cost effectiveness, reducing emergency repairs. Like Manager Hoffman just explained, got the call at 6 p.m. last night on Industrial Lane. We had a 20-inch main failure. The crews responded. We had a transformer that was directly above the water break. We had to get Excel out. Took them 2-3 hours to respond. They did good, but they had to find a crane truck local. They had to support the transformer so our crews could dig around it and under it so it wouldn't collapse on us as crews were fixing that. Today's a good day. Right before council, they reported that they did fix it and it's restored and back in service. And then, so good job to the crews. So the 2 projects that we're going after this year is Westlake Drive from South Princess Circle to Grove Way. It's 4,900 feet of 12-inch. On the map, you can kind of see the lower one. There's a little bit more that extends farther up to get the full 4,900 feet. Westlake Drive does not have a lot of residential homes that come out and tap into that line, but what you'll see is a lot of side streets. So when we have big main failures on Westlake Drive, we got to shut big sections of pipe, which puts out a lot of residents. So that's the Westlake Drive section. That section of pipe is ductile iron. It's one of our criteria that we want to get rid of. It's high on our list. One, because it puts people out, age of the pipe, and failure rate are all the big criteria for us. It was installed in about 1974. With a water line replacement, as you replace the water line, of course, everything comes with that price per foot, and that is the valving, the new fire hydrants, the service connections. If there is a service connection, the contractor, once the water goes through the water quality testing, which it means it's loaded, it's high chlorine, and then it's flushed, and then it gets a pressure test before that line passes our water quality lab so that that can go into the system as an active line. So we got to follow all the safety procedures to make it safe drinking water. So all those appurtenances are part of that. And then the other one is 136 Ave. Different than Westlake Drive. We're gonna probably build Westlake Drive. Here's the existing water line. We go about 3 feet off of that and we trench alongside of it and we replace it. And then we just tie things over and bend the old one in place. 136 Ave is a little different. Back in the day in the 70s, the Denver water feed came from Midway to Lowell. And at that point, it split to 2 20-inch lines that went up to the carbon tanks. This one, the path that we're taking right now, Lowell Boulevard to 136 Ave. This 20-inch has failed 5 times. It's in a corridor that has two-way traffic. So if we have crews out there, we have to shut sections of road down. And the other part is we're routing a lot of people through developments that, you know, is not real friendly to the individuals that live in those areas. And so the ideal piece of this project is we're using a different technology. We've used it in the past. It's called pipe bursting or slip lining. This is more of a slip line approach. What happens is we have a 20-inch main out in the road. The contractor will come and dig sections probably 1,000 feet away. And then they have fusible PVC. It's a product that they fuse the joints together compared to regular gasketed pipe. And they just pull 1,000 feet of that stuff in. The nice part about this project is we're not going to be digging for long hours along 136 Ave. We'll get through that area quicker. We're pulling in a 16-inch fusible PVC. That old pipe will now become the conduit and host. It'll protect it, and that corridor is very full. I've worked in it many times myself. There's a sewer line, there's a few storm lines, there's water lines, and then you have all the dry utilities. You got gas, electric. It's a space race. There's not much left out there. So this project, when I say it's ideal for a slip line, we're very excited. We did use our water modeler to show that the downsize, because we're going 20 to 16, that we don't lose any velocities or pressures and that type of thing. Why that's happened is if you go back to the beginning when I said when they first built Denver Water, we we're going across fields with these 20s to the tanks. Now, since then, all the developments are looped off of it, so we have all the additional looping that has happened over the years, so we don't lose that velocity downsizing on this one section. So we're excited about that one. And then part 2 of that bid process was there's a pressure regulating valve at 136 in Lowell. This piece was added in. This one is 50+ years. There's a pressure regulating valve that does not allow us to get replacement parts anymore, so it is in deep need of replacement. When we said there was 81 PRVs, usually in a pressure zone, you have 5 to 6 PRVs feeding that, so to take one out for the temporary of this won't hurt us, but we do need it for peak demands during summer and that type of thing. This project, bid documents were published September 30th, 2024. 7 pre-qualified utility contractors were invited. 4 firms attended the pre-bid project. We like to walk the project so they know what they're getting into, and we can most importantly explain to them the importance of what we want to keep. We have a couple schools in the area. Want to make sure that these schools are not affected during the regular school season. We like to usually do the water line replacement in front of these areas during the summer when the kids are not attending and parents don't have to worry about picking up and dropping off. Two bids were received on November 7th, 2024, and the two firms that didn't workload and unavailability at crews is why they chose not to bid the project. There's a lot of competition out there as we see right now. We're just glad to be securing a contract. And I'd like to say a good plug for Diamond. They did do the work for the reuse line from Sheridan on 136 down to the Red Leaf project. I was very impressed that they kept the area clean and organized and safe during that project. So we're glad to see that their bid was awarded, or not awarded, but low bid. The budget is available. We got 44.1 million. If approved, the construction will begin in late spring or early summer, depending on the contractor's availability. And then residents will be notified by postcards within 1,000 feet of each of these projects. We'll get postcards out. Variable message boarding, both Westlake Drive and 136 Ave are heavily transportation, so we'll be able to get a lot of visual through the boards. Of course, the project will be on the web page, and then all traffic control plans will be approved by Broomfield Traffic Engineer. And at that point, I am open for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rutt. We'll start with public comments. What?
Mr.
Ruger, oh my goodness. Thank you, Mr. Rutt, wherever you are. Thank you, Mr. Ruger. My apologies. We're going to take public comments first. So there's a person behind you. Habit.
Roxy Jula Lackamore. He did this so elegantly on explaining it that even a common person should kind of understand mostly of what was going on. I've seen this a lot in my line of work and stuff. We work joint with a lot of these projects. And this one is really worth it. Whenever we can get rid of the old garbage and make it reused actually, because we're going to use it for its outside casing. And the other one, yeah, well, it'll just be abandoned in the ground. But as long as it's on the records that it's abandoned, you know, we have all these pipes and everything else there. So as long as it's on the records and everybody knows that where it is, it can always be located one way or another, hopefully not the bad way. But this is a great thing for us to pay for. We really, really do need to get our infrastructure in better shape. We grew way too fast, and it's hard to go back and do this work. So this is something that is really needed in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? I don't see anyone online. Okay, we'll go to council questions next. Does any member of council have any questions? Next is Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would agree with, our public comment. Every time that Jeff Ruger is in front of us, I always feel like I get a master class in our water infrastructure. So thank you, Professor. February water bills for January usage just hit, and wowzers, that was a major sticker shock. But I think it is good that we continue to remind our residents and our businesses of the system that our dollars are paying for. Tonight's presentation is a great example of that. This is continuing to upkeep that water system to ensure that it's stable, that it's consistent, and that's a good thing. So I hope that we continue to regularly communicate the story of our system to ensure that folks are, learning that along with these higher water bills that they're going to be seeing from here on out. Thank you for your detailed presentation tonight. Just for reference, we learned tonight that Broomfield has 447 miles of transmission lines. we learned this already, but 284 miles of roadways and 281 miles of bikes, trails and sidewalks. So, Public Works definitely continues to keep our community running. So my questions, thank you. Do we anticipate closure of 136, the whole road for this section at any point during this project?
There'll be times where we will have to shut the section of road down. So when they pull their pipe in, it'll probably be open to paddle boards one way, kind of delay that way. But when they tie in the lateral lines that tie into this, we'll have to shut down because the lane that we're in plus the other lane is what we'll be going into. Sometimes we'll work with the contractor to work late at night when the transportation's down and that type of thing. Easier for them, easier for us, but then we have to weigh out the odds of noise for the residents that are local right there. So it's one or the other, and we opt for what's best for all. So
for sure. So with if there was a complete closure, would we be routing traffic through, I think it's Sunny Slope Estates right there and Broadlands? I mean, is that where we're routing traffic to?
It would either be, when we had the main failures out there, we did run them through, and I felt bad for the residents in that area because, there's a lot of transportation that moves through there. So we would weigh that heavily with the contractor and our project manager and our teams. We can either do it around Broadlands the other way, where it's more, less intrusive for the Sunny Slopes group, and
And I know with projects in the past that if there's something like this on a main arterial, such as 136, that we put signage a ways away to say, due to delays, we recommend, going up Sheridan to 144th or, moving around this direction instead of just trying to continue through that area.
And what we found during the projects is once people know we're there, they start rerouting around us anyway.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, I'll be taking Midway. Councilmember Lim?
Yes, I appreciate that this project is going forward. I was interested though as we look at the cost of the water increase in that, I was interested in the fact that the bid process went to 3 pre-approved contractors. And then we ended up with only 2 bidders. And as you expressed, you're satisfied with that final bid and that. But it seems like we don't have the competition in the bidding that might result in lower pricing. Does that make any sense from your experience?
It does. We've had full 7 contractors bid during times where they were all hungry and needed work. But we have seen in projects most recently, 2 to 3 we're lucky to get at this point because a lot of the contractors, you got a lot of new developments and that type of thing that are doing the same type of work. This type of work is more specific to some of these crews and they have the abilities. But we're glad to at least get to, yes, ultimately perfect would be 7. We like to see the heavy competition. But in those instances, you usually have 3 or 4 that are real high. What I'm glad is some of these are not bidding anymore because they used to just throw out high bids. If they got it, they were happy, but they were wasting our time and their time too.
So you feel like you have the earnest competitors left?
I am excited for the contractor that got the low bid on this because they do quality work.
Okay, thank you. And then knowing that we have a long list of projects for this and in the asset management realm, and we have only so much budget at a time to do this kind of work. What was staff's expectation as to how many projects we might have been able to do with the $4,100,000 budget versus what we ended up getting?
So let me understand that question. I'm trying to understand the full of it. So we had 4.1, what is?
Budgeted.
Okay,
Okay, so did you anticipate that, well, we ended up with 3 projects.
right.
Did staff anticipate that we hopefully would have got, well, of course, we hope we would have gotten more projects out of it, but what was the realistic expectation?
So to answer that and hope I get there, the engineer estimate on it, our pricing was much higher. So we actually got a lower bid and we were able to get more footage from the contractor after the fact because we had excess money to get more on Westlake Drive to fulfill that amount.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And is so we had 4.1 million in the water line project for 2025, then knowing that, again, that we have this long list
Yep.
of projects, is that an anticipated amount in the foreseeable future, annual amount that we will be allocating to these kind of projects?
Yes, we have a 30-year plan right now that we're starting to work. Sean and his team's been working diligently to put all the metallic lines in a forecast. And that's where Ken Rutt's heavy expertise has been helping us with the AECOM support show that, you know, how much footage can we get with the dollars for the rate increase to tie it all together so that we're using our dollars for the replacement into the future.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Lim, I think it's, and this goes back to Mayor Pro Tem's, that's one of the, much like the development updates happening quarterly. That's why we added the enterprise funds, those quarterly updates. I think the work that we've been able to do with the help of AECOM is to go to almost unit cost. So we've always known what it costs to pave per foot, bless you, or by mile. But all of those other accoutrements, we hadn't included those. And because when you don't have a frame of reference or your price point isn't maintenance, when we begin to shift even the mindset, so our structure changes as well. So we'll be sending council an update on how we are restructuring Public Works. And I don't remember what council member said it earlier tonight, between the dry and the wet side. Councilmember Ward, so, and we haven't talked about this for the rest of council. It's just a coincidence that that's exactly how we're splitting up. So not only structure-wise from a skill set, because it's very different from operations to planning to forecasting. And in the past, we've expected this team to do all of that, which is an unrealistic expectation. So we are dividing among Public Works as a whole so that Mr. Ruger and his crew can specifically focus on enterprise wet and water recovery. So we'll talk more about that at the April update. But yes, we have every intention to visually connect and correlate those not only increased dollars to what the projects are, but fundamentally what those unit costs are. So future increases are also tied to not just specific tangible projects, but what that planning looks like as we move forward. So really understanding and what that looks like. In 30 years, it doesn't sound like a long time, but in enterprise conversations, that's exactly the chunks that you look at are in decades. And we just haven't been there before. We haven't had that skill set. So Mr. Rutt and Mr. DeSole and Mr. Ruger are really forging the future of what this focus looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. As you can tell, communication is going to be very important. So I look forward to that. The one main concern that I have is that during this summer, we should have the light over at Legacy being it's also going to be planned. in that area. And so I'm worried and just want to understand maybe traffic diversion around that area. And if they're going on at the same time, because I know that they're also trying to do it while summer is going on and the kids are out of school. So how do these two interplay? Have you guys discussed that yet?
So project managers will work together and they'll try to schedule out. The good part for Westlake Drive, we won't have too much involvement with that because we're far enough down in Westlake Drive. But 136 Ave, we could see, is that project going this summer also?
Yeah, 136.
Okay. So we will need to schedule with them and coordinate efforts, so that we don't create a madhouse out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I even think like if we have some sort of, I think we've had emails before being sent to residents, giving them updates. If we could have someone maybe, if we could have staff develop some sort of communication system about those projects, and if people want to subscribe, then that way they get those updates, that'd be
Like that.
important.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Seeing none. Well, thank you, Mr. Ruger. Next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2025-05. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
7B, resolution number 2025-05, approving the construction agreement by and between Broomfield and Diamond Contracting Corp. For the 2025 water line replacement project.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Henkel?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Cohen? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. And that passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all so much and great job fixing that pipe. Next, under the mayor and council member requests for future action section of the agenda, I have a request for future action to permit marijuana retail shops to sell non-marijuana food and drinks to a cap of no more than 20% of overall revenue, which would be in line with the recently changed state law, Senate Bill 2476. I want to state that this is not a discussion on the topic and instead is an opportunity for council to provide staff direction on whether or not council desires staff to dedicate time and resources to this request. I'll now begin my 5-minute presentation. We have heard from some of our local operators that they would like to, they asked us to come into compliance with this new law, which would allow them to basically sell water, gum, snacks, packaged food, and that would really help them. So that's kind of what it is. I think we have some cleanup coming in April to our cannabis regs. On another matter, but since it's coming back in April, I was hoping we could do this cleanup in April when that comes back. All right, that's all. Short and sweet. Any comments? Okay, Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So, I appreciate you bringing this forward. What I think is really interesting is about the potential for shops to differentiate themselves with their use of food and drink options. So I think that's an interesting piece that is going into this. So, widening the offerings would allow for more differentiation between stores. It could be a new factor in the competitive landscape. I don't think that this is gonna, put Taco Bell out of business, in terms of munchies. So, that's my, one of my places I go to is Taco Bell. So I'm glad that, that's going to stay. So, I thank you for bringing this forward. I think that one of my, concerns is while there are going to be additional products that are included in the retail environment, that the marketing is still consistent, that it is not targeted toward teen and youth. So want to make sure that that still continues to happen. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
I just have 2 quick questions for staff. Is this going to take extra time considering that you're already updating it? And is this required?
No, it won't take time, and it's really separate from the other updates. That's a different part of the code related to zoning and some of the other cleanups. This specific change, if I'm being honest, we already have drafted it enough to get, so it doesn't take time. The second part of your question, is it required? No, the state changed a law and local governments still have their local regulatory authority in this space.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So any other feedback, questions, any objections to moving this forward to April? No, it'll be part of a business item. Would it be an ordinance?
It's an ordinance, yeah.
It'd be an ordinance in the same pool.
Mayor, can I just ask a couple clarifying questions real quick? I
Absolutely.
just want to make sure, you had mentioned gum, water, we're talking prepackaged food, right?
Correct.
No, okay.
Not a big.
Thank you. And sort of tied with Mayor Pro Tem's statement, we'll double check on the marketing and make sure those regulations in the marijuana code still apply. Any intention on on-site consumption? We're not looking for on-site consumption. We'd like to draft it to discourage on-site consumption.
No,
Okay,
not a cafe.
great. Great. That was the only questions from staff. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Falls under the category for staff is, we're defining it as skitscat,
What's that?
which is we are taking advantage of something that's already happening. So instead of having standalones, we skitscat, which is we capitalize on existing efforts, add a little more effort instead of 2 individual times.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate
And
that.
it's fun to say.
Councilmember Lim.
Since I didn't realize this was going straight to ordinance, so then I should have asked my question now instead of waiting till study session. It's clear that any clearance to enter the premises with age restrictions in that will all take place before anyone gets into the part where you're purchasing food, correct? I mean, no one can
Yes.
skip those clearance requirements just to get food.
Correct. All those still apply. You still need to be at the proper age to get into the facility.
Okay,
Even
great.
if you're like, I'm only here to buy gum.
Yeah.
Well, you can go somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Well, wonderful. Thank you all for your support, and I appreciate that. We'll see it back in April. There was an opportunity for public comments, so if anybody did want to comment, I do apologize. I'll give you that opportunity. No comment? Okay. Is there any other business to come before the council from my colleagues or staff? There being no further business, the business meeting is adjourned and council will convene for executive session shortly after this meeting. Thank you. Good night.